I was sitting with my coffee this morning, just doing the usual doom scrolling, checking the headlines,
Mhm.
and I had this really specific, kind of unsettling feeling. I was reading about housing prices, then about supply chain warnings, then something about, tariffs and foreign investment, and it just hit me. None of this feels like economics anymore.
Heavier is the word I hear a lot.
Exactly. It feels heavy. It feels less like we're looking at numbers on a spreadsheet, a normal business cycle, and more like we're reading about survival
hmm
or just pure politics. It's really hard to put a finger on it. But the whole vibe has shifted from how do we get rich to how do we not collapse?
That intuition is actually spot on. And honestly, it's a relief to just name it because I think a lot of people are feeling that weight without knowing why. That shift you're sensing, that is exactly what we are going to unpack today. We're looking at a stack of documents labeled GOA-12.
Which, to be fair, sounds like a clearance code for a secret military base in some sci-fi movie.
It does, doesn't it? But it's actually a structural analysis, a deeply observant look at a massive silent shift in how the modern state operates. And I really don't use the word massive lightly here. We aren't talking about a new tax law or an election result or a specific policy. We are talking about a rewrite of the operating system of governance itself.
The state OS,
Yeah.
right? That's the core metaphor in the source material. And the one-line thesis they propose is, well, it's a bit jarring. It says, the state has not stopped the market, but it has shifted from managing the market to operating the world membrane.
And that phrase right there, world membrane, that's going to be doing a lot of heavy lifting in this deep dive. It sounds abstract, I know, maybe even a little academic, but by the time we're done, I think you'll realize we're all living inside of it and that the membrane has, well, it's changed.
So just to set the ground rules for everyone listening, our mission today is to make this invisible shift visible. We aren't here to predict the future or tell you who to vote for or debate if this change is good or bad. We're just looking at the mechanics. We want to pinpoint the exact moment the rules of our reality were kind of rewired.
Exactly. We're observing the update as it installs. And we need to do this calmly because this is not a conspiracy theory. It's a structural observation of how the world works now.
Okay, so let's start with the what. What actually triggered this analysis in the source material? Because they point to a very specific phenomenon in the United States regarding institutional investors.
Right. The catalyst here is the massive acquisition of single-family housing by large institutional investors. The source material explicitly references companies like Blackstone, but it's really about that entire class of investment.
Okay, but let's pause there and play devil's advocate for a second. Big companies buying real estate isn't exactly new. I mean, private equity has been in commercial real estate forever. Why is this specific moment the trigger for a whole system update? Why does buying a bunch of suburban houses matter so much?
It's a great question. It's not just about who is buying, it's about what they are buying, and crucially, how the government reacted to it. When Wall Street buys an office tower, that's business. That's capital at work. But when Wall Street buys a cul-de-sac in the suburbs, that touches the core of the social contract. It touches where people sleep and raise families. But the real signal, the thing that really screams system change, wasn't the buying itself. It was the government's response.
Or, I guess, their lack of a traditional response.
Precisely. Think about the old world. Usually, if the government thinks a market is overheating, they use market tools, they raise interest rates, they might pass specific caps on ownership, they act like a referee blowing a whistle to pause the play, they say penalty, excessive exuberance, 5-yard loss.
Right. You just tweak the numbers to cool things down. It's all very mechanical.
But here, in this instance with housing, the state didn't stop the play. The prices kept moving, the transactions continued. There wasn't a sudden ban or some massive interest rate hike designed specifically to kill that trade. But the government did something subtler and I'd argue much, much more powerful. They named the business model.
Break that down for me. Because usually when I think of government action, I think of laws, not vocabulary.
And this is where it gets really fascinating. They stopped referring to it as market efficiency or investment freedom. They started reclassifying it in official rhetoric, in strategy documents, in the way policymakers spoke as a risk to social order.
Wow. That is a huge linguistic shift. It's like the referee didn't blow the whistle, but got on the loudspeaker and said, "Attention, everyone, this game is no longer just a sport. It is now a matter of national safety."
And that changes the meaning of every single move on the board. The source emphasizes that this wasn't a reaction to a crash. We aren't in a 2008-style meltdown where the government is scrambling to fix a broken machine. This was a control of meaning prior to a crisis.
The source calls this updating the condition for being permitted. It sounds almost ominous. It implies the market is on a really short leash.
It implies the market is no longer viewed as a neutral machine that always produces the right answer. In the old world, the assumption was that if the market clears, if a buyer and seller agree on a price, then the outcome is correct. That's been the gospel for 40 years. Now, the state looked at the housing market and effectively said, you are allowed to exist, but only as long as you don't break the social fabric.
So the permission to do business is now contingent on not upsetting the social order. It's not just about legality anymore, it's about stability.
Correct. And the moment that naming happened, the moment housing became a security issue rather than just an asset class, the operating system updated. And that brings us to the next section. We really need to talk about the state OS.
Yeah, let's dig into this. I think this is where the light bulb really turns on for people trying to understand why everything feels so political right now. The source contrasts the old OS with the new OS.
Right. So let's look at the old OS, basically the era we've all been living in since, well, the late 20th century, arguably since the end of the Cold War.
The whole end of history era, the 90s, the early 2000s.
Exactly. And the core assumption of that old OS was markets optimize themselves autonomously. The invisible hand.
Right. If you just leave it alone, it fixes itself. Efficiency is king.
Yeah.
A rising tide lifts all boats, all those phrases.
And in that old OS, what was the state's role? It was an external adjuster. The state was the repairman who only came in when the plumbing burst. Or maybe the gardener who just trims the hedges every so often.
And politically, the whole narrative was always about designing a better future.
Yes. Think about the slogans. Vote for us and you'll get richer, or freer, or happier. It was about selling a vision of growth. We're going to build a great society. We're going to build a bridge to the 21st century. It was aspirational.
That feels very familiar. That's essentially every campaign speech I've ever heard.
Right.
But you're saying that OS is effectively gone. That sounds huge.
It's being overwritten as we speak. The new OS has a fundamentally different assumption. It assumes that markets are not these benevolent optimizers. They are environmental elements.
Environmental elements. That makes them sound like the weather or like a force of nature.
That's the perfect analogy. They are powerful forces, like a hurricane or a flood. You don't trust a hurricane to optimize your coastline. You survive it. In the new OS, markets are only allowed to exist conditionally.
So if the market is the weather, potentially dangerous weather,
Yeah.
what does the state become? It can't just be the repairman anymore.
The state becomes the catastrophe avoidance layer.
Wow. That is a massive downgrade in optimism. Catastrophe avoidance layer. It sounds like a firewall on a computer.
It's a downgrade in optimism, but a massive upgrade in control. In the new OS, the political goal isn't to sell you a dream of a better future. It's to explain inevitability and manage survival. The language shifts from growth language to boundary language.
Boundary language. So instead of we will build a great society, it becomes we will prevent the world from collapsing.
Exactly. Just listen to the news tonight. We will secure the border. We will secure the supply chain. We will secure the housing market. We will protect critical infrastructure. Notice the verb change. It's not improve or grow or build. It's secure.
It reminds me of the difference between, say, architecture and sandbagging. When you're building a house, you argue about the paint color, the layout, the style. That's democracy. That's debate in growth. When you're sandbagging a flood, you don't argue about the color of the bags. You just stack them where the water is rising.
That is a perfect analogy. And right now, the state is telling us the water is rising. And when the water is rising, you don't care about market efficiency. You care about the integrity of the wall.
But this raises a huge question. If the state is just there to stop catastrophes, what happens to the stuff we usually associate with democracy? You know, debating ideas, choosing a direction.
And that's the crucial insight from the source. This isn't necessarily a failure of democracy, even though it really feels like it. It's the expiration of the assumptions that allowed democracy to function the way we knew it. When the goal shifts from thriving to surviving, the tools of the state have to change. You don't vote on the laws of physics, and you don't vote on how to stop a dam from bursting. You just let the engineers work.
Which brings us to the deepest layer of this whole analysis. We've talked about the state OS, but the source introduces this term, the world membrane.
Yes, this is level 4 of the analysis, and this is the abstract part, but stick with me because it really explains everything.
I have to be honest, world membrane sounds like something out of a theoretical physics paper. What does it actually mean in this context?
It's actually pure sociology. The world membrane refers to the collection of implicit premises that we all believe without thinking. It's the water we swim in. It's the stuff you don't even debate because everyone just assumes it's true.
Okay, give me an example of a premise that's in the membrane.
Sure, here are a few. Markets are neutral. Rational investment always helps society. The state only intervenes as a last resort. Capital doesn't have a nationality. These aren't laws written down in the Constitution. They are beliefs. They are the trust structure that holds the global economy together.
And the source is saying this membrane has been, what, punctured?
Damaged, perhaps structurally compromised. We're now realizing that a perfectly rational market behavior like an algorithm buying up undervalued housing to maximize returns for pensioners can actually destroy the society that those pensioners live in.
Right. It's rational for the investor, but it could be fatal for the community.
Yeah.
In the old OS, we'd say, well, the market will correct itself.
Mm-hmm.
In the new OS, we realized, no, the market will just consume the community.
Exactly. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. And that's the difference between reversible and irreversible changes. This is a key distinction in the source material.
Walk us through that. What's reversible?
Laws are reversible. You can pass a regulation today and repeal it tomorrow. Administrations change every 4 or 8 years. Tariffs can be lifted. Those are surface level. But investor psychology, the loss of trust in market neutrality, that is irreversible.
Because once an investor realizes, oh, my assets might be reclassified as a national security threat at any moment, they never look at the market the same way again.
Exactly. They start pricing political risk into absolutely everything. The market stops being a neutral machine and becomes a conditional permission device.
Yeah.
You are only allowed to make money if the state agrees it doesn't hurt the membrane.
The source mentions a narrative conflict here that I found really interesting. It pits Blackstone, representing the old finance and real estate economy, against something called Saga Metals, representing this new resource and security economy.
Yes, Saga Metals is a hypothetical stand-in for the new priority. Strategic resources, lithium, copper, rare earths, the stuff you need to build the batteries and the defense systems.
And the conflict is about who wins.
But the source is very specific about this. It does not matter who wins that specific fight. It doesn't matter if the finance guys beat the resource guys or vice versa. What matters is that the state has decided to intervene at all. The state has looked at the board and said, we are no longer assuming that financial efficiency is the highest good. Security is the highest good.
It's a re-ranking of values.
A re-ranking that updates the operating system for everyone.
Now, we've been focusing heavily on the U.S. because that's where the data in our source comes from, specifically that housing shift. But the next part of our outline makes it clear. This isn't just an American story.
No, this is a high-level event affecting the entire globe. The source calls it a security fusion.
Security fusion.
It means national security is fusing with daily life. I mean, think about it. In the old OS, things like housing, food, and energy were commodities. You trade corn like you trade stocks. You buy energy from the cheapest provider, even if it's a geopolitical rival.
Because capital is green. It doesn't matter where money comes from or goes to as long as it circulates.
Right. And that assumption is expiring rapidly. In the new OS, these things are reclassified as social infrastructure. If the price of food goes too high, it's not a market signal anymore. It's a riot risk. It's a national security failure. If you buy your energy from a rival, you aren't being efficient. You're being vulnerable.
We're seeing this everywhere. Bans on foreign land ownership, restrictions on chip exports. The idea that foreign capital equals safe money is basically dead.
We are seeing a world where investment is vetted not just on returns, but on allegiance.
The source brings up Japan specifically as a projection. Why Japan?
Because Japan is interesting. The observation is that countries like Japan haven't named this crisis aloud yet. They are still trying to run the old OS in public, talking about growth, efficiency, maintaining the status quo.
So they're pretending the 1990s never ended.
In a way, but they face the exact same critical points. Real estate punches, water rights issues, the strain on medical care, on education. They are seeing the cracks in the membrane.
It's like they have the same virus in the system, but they haven't admitted they need to reboot yet.
And the source argues it's not a question of if the assumptions will break in Japan or Europe. It's a question of when they will be forced to verbalize it. When will they have to stand up and say, we are restricting this market because it threatens our survival?
And that's the moment the OS updates.
That's the moment. And
Yeah.
usually that moment comes when the pain of the old OS becomes greater than the fear of the new OS.
So let's try to bring this all together. We've covered a lot of abstract ground. The world membrane, the catastrophe avoidance layer, this whole shift from growth to security.
Mhm.
If we had to summarize this shift into a single headline, what would it be?
The headline is, "The state didn't stop the market. It fundamentally updated the world membrane to say, the market is allowed to exist only as long as it doesn't break the world."
That feels like such a simple statement, but the implications are massive. It changes the entire relationship between the citizen, the dollar, and the government.
It creates a new reality where the state is a boundary manager. That's its primary job now, managing the boundaries so the center doesn't fall apart.
And this leads us to the provocative questions the source leaves us with. And frankly, there are questions that should probably keep us up at night. Because if the state is just a boundary manager, just there to keep the walls from falling in, where does democracy live?
That is the big one. Democracy is usually about choosing a direction. Let's go left, let's go right, let's expand, let's conserve. But if the direction is just avoid collapse, is there really a choice?
It feels like we're moving from a pilot model, where the passengers vote on where to fly the plane, to a mechanic model, where we just need someone to keep the engine running so we don't crash. You don't vote on engine repair.
Exactly. And secondly, if markets are just conditionally permitted, where does individual freedom retreat to? If your ability to buy, sell, or invest is always subject to a national security override, are you truly free or are you just licensed?
That's a chilling distinction, being free versus being licensed.
And finally, the source asks, can this world membrane be repaired? Can we ever go back to trusting the market to be neutral? Or are we growing a brand new membrane?
What's the verdict on that?
The source suggests the latter. We are growing something new. The old trust is broken. We are building a new structure based on verification, boundaries, and security. We aren't going back to 1999.
So for the listener who is trying to process all of this, maybe they're looking at Zillow or reading about tariffs or just watching the news tonight, what should they be looking for? Because we promised them a way to see this.
Don't just watch for new laws or interest rate hikes. Those are the old signals. That's looking for the referee's whistle. Watch for the naming.
The naming?
Watch for when a leader, any leader, anywhere in the world points at a normal, everyday economic activity, buying a house, trading tech, importing car parts, buying farmland, and calls it a threat.
Watch for when the referee stops the game to talk about safety.
Yes, when you hear that, don't just think, oh, that's politics. Think OS update.
Yep.
That is the sound of the world membrane shifting. That is the sound of the state moving from managing growth to managing survival.
A shift from designing the future to managing survival. It's a sobering thought, but one we absolutely need to understand to navigate what's coming next.
Absolutely. The first step is seeing the water we're swimming in. Once you see the membrane, you can navigate it.
Well, on that note, we are going to wrap up this deep dive into the structure of reality. Thank you for taking this journey with us. It's a lot to chew on, but hopefully the world looks a little clearer, even if it is a little more complex.
Keep observing the boundaries.
See you next time.